as I've said many times, 1998 was by far, I'd say it's it's my best year by far. I mean, it's the year of my career that I remember the most, and is where I first made a name for myself, and had more fights in that year than most fighters will ever have in their career. I believe, I don't have the record in front of me, but I had 50-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, if you're counting the pancrase fights and all of that. The year didn't start out very good. I fought a tournament in Wisconsin, and I won the first round of the tournament. And I fought a pretty tough guy named Jim Theobald, and I armbarred him. And then the finals, I got headlock choked by some wrestler, and he didn't go on to do anything. I think he might have been like 2-3 when he was finally done. It's just like I caught a stupid choke, and that was it. I'm trying to think which order they came in. I fought a tournament next, I think. I had a tournament in my hometown. It was a 2-night tournament. And the first round of the tournament, I fought a fighter out of Muscatine, Iowa. And he was a fat guy, but that don't mean shit. He was tough, and he went blow for blow with me. And I then, he was sitting there, and he came to bang. I then caught him in an armbar, and it was kind of a dick move. After what happened with Matt Lindland not tapping out, or tapping out and claiming he didn't, I vowed to never let go of an arm until the referee stopped me. And unfortunately for the guy that I fought, we were caught up against the side of the cage, and the referee couldn't get in there and get me. And I knew he was tapping, he was screaming. That was a dick. That was a dick move. And I do feel bad. So, Jamie Schell, I've always felt bad about ripping your arm off. Sorry, brother. In the finals of the tournament, which was the second night of the tournament, I fought a fighter named Sam Adkins. And Sam Adkins was a UFC veteran. I believe he fought in the UFC 3 times, 3 or 4. Might have went like 2-2. His losses were Don Fry and Tank Abbott, who, if you know UFC fights, you know history of MMA, you know exactly who they are. The crowd, they definitely thought I was going to lose. Adkins like 6'6", 6'7", just a big built bald guy. And for some reason, I don't recall having any fear. I was just pretty confident I was going to win easily. And I got a nice takedown on him, and the crowd went crazy. I slammed him, and then he reversed me right away. And we ended up in the triangle position. I instantly transitioned to an armbar and tapped him out in like 50 seconds. So it was a big win. It was the biggest win of my career in my mind at that point, because he was a UFC fighter, and he's a UFC fighter who had won fights in the UFC. The very next night, which was a Sunday, I fought in Atlanta, Georgia. So I had fought in Iowa on Friday and Saturday, then I fought in Georgia on Sunday. And what had actually happened was I became friends with the promoters of the IFC, and one of the promoters asked me to fight in his event in Atlanta. It was just a small event held in a club down there, in like a bar or whatever. And so me and another guy just jumped in vehicle after the fights on Saturday night and drove through the night and fought in Atlanta the next night. And I fought a fighter named Courtney Turner. He claimed he was 16-0. I don't know what his record was. I think he had a couple that I actually really saw. Before that, I actually think he lost. He claimed he was Brazilian, even spoke with a Brazilian accent. And, Courtney Turner sure sounds fucking Brazilian, but he said his name ends in E, so Courtney and Turner end in E's. Like, his name is Courtney Turner. It's like, yeah, it sounds legit. I beat him pretty easy. I beat him like a minute with punches. But later on that year, he actually ended up fighting in the UFC. He fought Chris Brennan in, I don't remember which UFC, like UFC 16, and got tapped out by an armbar maybe. I'm not sure. you know, I mean, it was a time, you know, when just being in the UFC meant something. And even today, you know, like, you know, things haven't changed. There aren't many fighters who made a name for themselves without having fought in the UFC. One of the few exceptions might be like Fedor. And I don't know the reasons why he didn't fight in the UFC. I've heard stories. I don't know if any of them are true, but you know, he was a legitimately tough guy and still is. I mean, look what he did to Quentin Jackson recently. Although I'll say Quentin Jackson was a little fat for that fight, a lot of fat. Now I have no room to call anybody fat. However, you know, I was never also a big ripped dude like Quentin was. You know what he actually looked like? You remember the movie The Great White Hope, I believe it was, with Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson and one of the Wayans brothers. And the Wayans brother, like, doesn't take the fight seriously and just comes in big and fat and still wins. But that's kind of what I feel like Quentin Jackson looked like in that fight. And, you know, Quentin isn't going to watch this shit, but I apologize, Quentin. We all know where we stand. And, I mean, I met a lot of these guys. You know, I met Quentin before he was anybody. I met a lot of these guys before they were anybody. And, you know, I mean, they're nice to me now. I don't know if it's the respect thing or whatever, but it was probably because I met them before they were anybody. Most of them anyways. I mean, there's some fighters that just, like, I just don't understand why if you get some sort of celebrity status, why that means you gotta be a dick. And, I mean, I know fans, they can be annoying. I've been annoyed by them before, but, you know, at the same time, it's just, I have fun. I also don't get, like, absolutely swarmed. You know, one time that comes to mind where I actually was with a guy that this happened was Ken Shamrock. And we were hanging out at a club in California. And this was when he was famous from, like, the WWF, WWE, whatever you want to call it. And he was just such a dick to the people, like, trying to get autographs and pictures. And, I mean, they yelled at somebody. He's like, now get the fuck away from me. And then he looks at me and he's like, God, I love my life. But he's got, like, a smile. I mean, he's not being sarcastic. Like, he really loved his life. And I was like, what are you being a dick to people, dude? And, yeah, I mean, Kenny was always cool to me, but, you know, I mean, a lot of the guys were. After that, I fought Jeremy Horn. It was a rematch, and I talked about it earlier, an earlier video. You know, Jeremy and I fought in 1997. I don't know why I didn't bring that up when I was talking about 1997 in my last video. But the fight was outside. You know, Jeremy's a tough guy, and I caught him in a guillotine choke and almost tapped him out. But after that, he escaped. And the fight just went 15 minutes, and there were no judges, so it was a draw. It was outside. It was raining. It was really, really slick. And so, I mean, nobody could really do anything. I remember at one point I tried to, like, plant my feet and throw a punch, and I actually just fell on my ass. And Jeremy, another time he tried to push me into the cage, and I grabbed the cage and just spin us right back towards the center. I mean, that was how slick it was. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think Jeremy was kind of just thought this fight was a fluke, and we fought again in his hometown in Council Bluffs, which is across the river from Omaha, which is where he was from. The fight was 20 minutes long, and there were no judges again. And I think this time, had there been judges, it would have been a toss-up as to who won. I believe he'd have won the first time. He probably had the better position. But this one would have been a toss-up. There was at one point where I threw an elbow, and it was north-south elbow, which is completely illegal these days, but in those days it was legal, and I dropped him with it. Horn told me afterwards that that elbow really rocked him and knocked him out for a second. And I mean, I can understand that. You know, there's lots of times that I completely remember I got rocked hard in a fight, and then I'll watch a video of it later, and it's like, man, it looks like I barely got hit, and it looks like it didn't even affect me, but yeah, I was hurt. But yeah, the fight went the distance and was a draw. And right after this fight, Jeremy had got a call to fight in the UFC as like a last-minute replacement to fight Frank Shamrock. And at that time, Frank Shamrock was the face of the UFC. He was the biggest name guy. there, and I don't know if they had belts then, but I'm pretty sure he was a champion if they did. Frank had destroyed his first two guys. He beat Kevin Jackson in 16 seconds, and then he beat Igor Zinoviat in like 22 or 23 seconds. They were like very, very good fighters. And Horn just, he's unassuming. He's never got the credit he deserves. I mean, he's a great fighter. And, he beat Chael Sonnen 3 times. He knocked out Forrest Griffin. He beat Chuck Liddell. Beating a lot of good guys, but he never got the credit he deserved for it. I don't know. I'm not sure why. I mean, and Horn, he's an unassuming fighter. You know, grappling wise, when you're just wrestling him, if there's no punches, he's not hard to take down. But he transitions really well for MMA and the types of takedowns and takedown defenses you need in that. So he's actually kind of tough to take down, and he'll take you down. He took down Randy Couture when they fought. I mean, he's a very unassuming fighter. And he beat the piss out of Frank Shamrock. I don't remember what the time limit was. In those days, the time limit changed from event to event, and even with the UFC. I fought in UFC 20, and the time limit was a 10-minute first round, 3-minute overtime. Fought in UFC 21, and the time limit was 2 5-minute rounds. So it changed per event. So I won't try and get into what I think the time limit was, but it was at like the 16-minute mark. And, Shamrock's getting just dominated. He can't do anything to Horn. And Monty Cox had told me later that the judges even came up to Peretti between rounds and like, well, what do we do? Who do we vote for? And in those days, John Peretti was to the UFC what Dana White is to the UFC now. And, Peretti just said, vote for the fucking winner. And I don't know White, so I can't say anything. I may have met him before he became who he was. I don't know. I don't remember, but I don't like how he pits the guys against each other. It's a good marketing tool, but Peretti was more of a fan of the sport, student of the sport, and understood, and he didn't play favorites like that. But it was like the 16-minute mark, I believe is what it was. Shamrock did catch Horn in the knee bar and won. And, but Horn should have and could have upset him. I ended up getting, my first step fight of the year was Dan Severn in April of 1998. And, of course I want to fight Dan Severn. He's a big name guy. I mean, I didn't get in this, like I said, to make a name. I wanted to fight the stars, and Severn was the star. He was one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name in the sport at that time. And I mean, I even remember when I first saw Severn, was like, my stomach dropped. Like, oh my God, it's Dan Severn. And even got his autograph. I think I sent a buddy to go get his autograph for me because I was too nervous to do it. And Monty Cox called me asking if I knew anybody to fight Severn. And of course I was like, I'll do it. And I don't know why he's calling me for that. I think that was probably, he just didn't ask me to do it. I don't know why he wouldn't think I would. Severn was so much bigger than me, but I didn't fucking care. And Severn did. He just, God, he manhandled me. He was so fucking strong and took me down so easily. And, they stood us up and about the 10-minute mark, and he just shot an explosive double leg and right in the mount and put me in a key lock and just fucking ripped my arm off. And yeah, he bitched me, man. I mean, that was one of the times it stands out that, I really just fucking got beat, in a fight where I felt like I couldn't do nothing. And that was one of them. I did break his nose. I cut him open and broke his nose. And another one that kind of threw me off the go was Severn fought barefoot, which I thought was odd. Even before the fight, Jeremy Horn was telling me, like, you're fighting Severn, you're going to kick his fucking ass. And it's because Severn had fought Horn a year earlier, and it was a draw again, but I think Horn dominated it. I don't know, if Dan just had trouble with him or what, which wouldn't shock me. Horn was just goofy fighter you had to adapt for. After the Severn fight, I won a couple of fights in the month of May, smaller events. And then my big step-up fight was an IFC tournament held in Montreal, Canada. It'd be my first time fighting out of the country, so I was pretty excited about that. And I was stupid. Like, me and my buddies, we just jumped in our vehicle. We drove to Montreal. So Iowa to Montreal was like 20 hours. And we got stuck at the border, had to pay to get in the country. You know, it was fun. I mean, I actually turned 21 the night before the fight, and I'm pretty sure I even drank. It was 21st birthday. But you only had to be 18 to drink in Montreal at that time, too. So, kind of a moot point there. This was the second time there was MMA fights held in Montreal. The first time was an event called Extreme Fighting 2, the Battlecade. And it was held on the Kanawaki Indian Reservation, which is where this fight was going to be held. And they tried to shut it down. They didn't. The guys fought. And then after the fight, they all got arrested. All the charges were eventually dropped. All the fighters who did fight that night got arrested. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories. It's one of those urban legends. And, you know, some guys got away, whatever. They had some weird rules, though, for this event. It was... on your feet, you could knee, punch, kick, everything. But on the ground, you could only strike in a defensive manner. And you could only strike with the back of your fist. So if you're on top of somebody, the guy on the bottom can hit you with a back fist. And naturally, this confused a bunch of the guys. And I know one fighter did get disqualified that night for throwing illegal blows. I fought a fighter named Eric Hill out of Florida. He was just a weird dude. He wasn't like overly tough, but I pummeled this guy with everything while standing. And he just real easy to hit, but once we went to the ground, fed me an armbar, and I went for it and just ripped his arm off, but it was like nothing. He even turned the wrong way. It had no effect on him whatsoever.
This ought to be interesting here. Right hand that connected, but doesn't see the face of a nice left. Comes back to the right. A couple more rights, a left, a nice combination. 2 rights in a row, a third. Experienced fighters in the tournament with so many bouts. A nice armbar. A nice armbar.
That could be it.
Looking for the submission. Eric Hill trying to roll out of it. Trying to roll out of it.
Rolling the wrong way.
The buzzer went off. 2-minute time limit was up, and we stood us back up, and then pummeled him again, and then took him to the ground again, and just went for the armbar again, and same thing. And so the third time they stood us up, I pummeled him a lot, standing again. And this time I pulled guard. I just figured maybe I'll try an armbar from the bottom. And that's what I went for, and same result. It didn't hurt him.
He's going to get a little rest down there. Possibly try another armbar. Here's his hips return. There it is.
Going
Now
for the
let's see if
armbar
he's got it or not. Yep. Looks like he's got it this time.
Eric Hill continues to have some unbelievable depth against Travis Fulton. Eric Hill certainly has done his study of his triangle martial art.
It's all over here.
Every time we say that, though, Lewis, Eric Hill finds a way to get out of it.
Once he got out of the armbar, I let it go, and I just slapped on triangle choke, and this time he finally tapped. So I won the first round of the tournament. I ended up winning the whole tournament because my opponent, who had won the other side of the bracket, he was hurt and couldn't continue, so I got the tournament win by default. In the month of June, I had a couple of fights, and then I fought in the IFC yet again, this time in Minnesota. It was a short drive, so I actually got a lot of people from our group of fighters. I don't even know what the fuck we were doing. But I got some guys that came up with us, and we all went up there and fought, and I was the only fighter from our group of, I think I brought 10 guys up there, and I was the only one that won any. But I brought up a fighter I trained with named Mark Jake with, and we were in the same bracket as each other. And I was like, well, we train together, what happens when we get to the finals? And they told us, just do a grappling match, and I was not for that at all, because in the gym, he was a gym fighter, and Mark could beat me most of the time. But it didn't work out that way. Mark fought a guy out of the Raw wrestling team, which, fans may not, I don't even know if they still exist, but they were coached by Lou Enrico Ciparelli, produced fighters like Ray Couture and Vladimir Medyashenko, a bunch of tough wrestlers. And this guy, stomped on Mark's head and won in under a couple minutes. I fought a guy out of Atlanta, and he was a tough wrestler. I guess he wrestled in the Army. And he gassed out, and then I got his back and just threw a barrage of elbows and knocked him out. So, I mean, these elbows completely illegal today, but they were more illegal in those days. I had a bitch moment, though, after this fight. Like, I had a tough first round fight, and my knee was kind of bugging me, and just seeing Mark get beat by this guy, like, for a second, I thought maybe I'm going to bail. I'm not going to do the finals and back out. And it was a bitch moment for a second because I decided to do it, and then I wasn't nervous. And this guy was just so much, he was a lot bigger than me. And you just tell how arrogant he was. And his arrogance is right there, obvious in this fight. His coach, Lou Ciparelli, says, "Don't stand up with me, take me to the ground," and he's a wrestler. And as you see, the idiot stands up with me, and he gets dropped. I hit this guy with everything, elbows. I mean, it's legal. I'd throw him punches from everywhere. I've got to imagine. He was clueless as what to do, and eventually I did get him in a triangle choke and quickly transitioned to an arm bar and tapped him. And like my old promise, I'm not letting go until he stopped me, and the referee slapped my hand off. It was, this is my third, fourth, maybe tournament win of the year. As a halfway point, we're at the end of June of 1998. I got a lot of stories, don't want to waste all your time getting into that now. People seem to like it. Once again, the video quality sucks. It's the technology I'm working with. Why do you care about seeing my ugly face anyways? I'll just come back with the second half of 98. Now I'm starting to meet people, starting to meet fighters, and some of the names in the sport, and making a name for myself. Even after that fight, there wasn't, the internet didn't cover much for MMA, so there wasn't a database or anything like that where you can really see how fights turned out. But there were like publications, and one of them was called Fight News Weekly or Monthly, some shit like that. And it was just like I bought my subscription, but it was just like front and back paper, and it was stapled together. But it was cool to get it, and they had rankings, and they covered this event, and for the first time I was ranked. Ended up being ranked number 25 in the world at that time, and this is about as close to official rankings as they had for MMA in those days. So it was at that point, I really felt like, wow, I'm actually starting to do something. It was a great time for me. So got a lot of fun stories I could tell, and we'll just get at you next time, see what I come up with.